Hello, welcome to ECO-595, Applied Business Research. In this lecture, we're going to go over Chapter 10, Survey Research, Communicating with Respondents. So in Chapter 10, we're going to talk about various formats of conducting survey, and we're going to discuss their advantages and disadvantages. But again, let me repeat what I mentioned in the previous chapter. The bottom line is conducting survey requires more knowledge than one usually assumes. So if you can afford to do it, hire an expert to conduct the survey. If not, if you have to conduct your own survey, make sure you study the art of conducting survey carefully and make sure that you can collect quality data for your research when using survey. So the first type of research is called personal interviews. That basically means you interview or you conduct a survey in person, you talk to the respondents in person. Now, in this page, you can see all the advantages of conducting personal interviews. Starting from the top one, that means is opportunity for feedback, which means if you're conducting in-person interviews, you could inquire about feedback, right? If the respondents are there, you could ask about their opinion about the survey. You could also probe complex answers. Now, if you ask sometimes you conduct survey, you ask an open-end question, and the answer you got from the respondent may not be clear to you. So if it's personal interview, you do have the opportunity to probe further about the answer. You can also control the length of the interview, and usually in-person interview can be a little bit longer than other format because after it is interacting with another person, it's, I have to say, less boring than answering mail surveys or questionnaires. Okay, with personal interview, you can also ensure complete answers. You can make sure the respondent answer every question. Sometimes the respondent may refuse to answer a question, but that's a different story. At least you will know no question was skipped without. No, okay, sorry. So no question are skipped unintentionally. In addition, with personal interviews, you can use props and visual aids that will actually enhance the effectiveness of the survey. Sometimes you need to show a picture or show something visually for the person to really understand what's going on, right? If you're trying to describe a roadmap, it's better to show the roadmap instead of you using words to describe it. And typically for in-person interviews, there's high participation for various reasons, especially for in-person interviews, right? Someone goes there to talk to you, and now since you are talking a real person, there are people who will feel, wants to be the nice citizen and answer the survey. If this is by mail, then sometimes we might just discard the mail. Okay, so these are the advantages of personal interviews. Of course, there are disadvantages of personal interviews, and the biggest one to me is cost. Really, speak of cost, the cost of labor in the United States is so expensive, right? If it's done by machine, it's cheaper. If you need someone to come to your house to fix something, oh well, there's always some charge, right? The other day, the house I'm living in right now has a gate that encloses the whole backyard, and the gate just stopped working the other day. So I called, and a technician came, and the charge is $100 no matter what happens. That's the basic charge. And once the gate is fixed, we're gonna need to pay for extra if there's further installment or further accessories used. So anyway, if you are using a person to conduct the interview, that will be costly. Another disadvantage is interviewer influence. Yes, that happens. It depends on who you hire to conduct the interview, right? Sometimes the tone or the gesture or even the looking of the interviewer can influence the respondents, right? And especially if the respondent is talking to someone in person, the respondents have more incentive or are more inclined to appear to be this average person, right? And another disadvantage would be lack of anonymity of respondent. That is, well, even though I may not remember the respondent, but during the interview, at least I know you are the person and this is how you look, this is your name. At that point, I know something about you, even though the interviewer may not remember afterwards, but at that point, it's not anonymous. So next, let's take a look at the two types of personal interviews. You could conduct personal interviews through door-to-door, or you could do mall intercept interviews. That's basically two methods you can do. Sometimes you can do interview on the street, but that wouldn't happen in Texas, at least not during an ordinary day, right? So for door-to-door personal interviews, that means you knock on the door in this community, and this is useful usually when you need to conduct survey based on a limited region. That is, if you are interested in residents in this community, that's probably the best way to do it. Mall interview, you can go to the mall during weekend. There are many people shopping there. You can conduct the interview. For mall interview, the biggest issue is, of course, you're going to have selection bias, right? Because you're only interviewing people who go to the mall. And there are people who never go to the mall. Like for me, I used to shop in the mall quite a lot, but nowadays I cannot afford it, not because of the price, it's because of the time, right? I just don't find time to drive to the mall, walk in the big mall, going through the stores. I'd rather shop something online, right? So that's about the personal interviews. Starting from next page, we're going to talk about other format of interviews, and let's also talk about advantages and disadvantages based on what we discussed for in-person interviews. The first one is telephone interviews. This is personal interviews conducted by telephone. So you would be talking to a person, but that's not face-to-face, right? It is the mainstream of commercial survey research. A lot of times when I think about conducting survey, phone interview is most like the first candidate as the first choice. However, there is some limitation, like the no-call legislation has limited this capacity. But on the other hand, I have to say, not really to that much. I am on the no-call list, but I still got a lot of telemarketing phone calls all the time. I believe you do the same, right? Well, by the way, if you are not on the do not call list, and if you are tired of receiving all these telemarketing phone calls, you might consider doing that, because it will filter some of the phones, not all of them. Okay, so now let's talk about the pros and cons of phone interviews. I know you don't see anything here. Now, typically, in an ideal situation, I would hold this as lab lecture, but due to the schedule this semester, we don't have it. And during lab lecture, I would like you to think through the pros and cons together with me, right? So I'm gonna pause for a few seconds for you to think about it quickly. What are the pros and what are the cons of the phone interview you can think of? All right, so here are a few things I can think of, and they're also coming from the textbook. The first one about phone interview would be speed, right? Phone interview is easy. It's very quick for you to dial on to find someone, although you might have to try several times to find someone picking up the phone first. But the speed is one of the pros, right? And cost is another pros in comparison to in-person interview, because you don't need to walk to the mall or walk door to door to conduct an interview. You could just sit in the office. As long as you have this telephone, you can conduct a phone interview. It is less personal in the sense that although the interviewer is talking to the respondent, but it's over the phone, so they do not see each other. So a lot of the information are not revealed. At least through a phone interview, the interviewer will not know how the respondent looks like, right? There's also opportunity for interviewers to call back if this time the respondent didn't pick up the phone call for whatever reason. The interviewer could call again to make sure that the interviewer could call again to see whether he or she can get the answer or not. The cons of phone interview. Well, the first one in comparison to face-to-face is the absence of face-to-face contact. And why that's important? Well, I know this is one of the pros. I know face-to-face contact is one of the cons for in-person interview because you're gonna have interviewer influence. But on the other hand, for phone interview, just because there's no face-to-face contact, the interviewer will not be able to read the body language from the respondent. And sometimes you cannot tell whether the respondent is telling you something happy, or the respondent is answering it in a rush, or the respondent is impatient. So there are a lot of things missing with phone interview. Also for phone interview, there's limited duration because you can't talk over the phone for a long time. For number one, people just don't have time for it over the phone call. Number two, at least for me, talking over the phone is not as effective as talking in person, right? Sometimes there's over the phone, it might not be clear, etc. Another thing is, since it's not face-to-face, you cannot use any visual medium. That is, you cannot show anything. You have to describe everything over the phone. So, and that means for certain research, it's good for you to use phone interview, but for certain research, if you rely on a lot of pictures, graphs, you might consider mail-in interview or in person, because then you can at least show some visual medium. The last disadvantage I want to mention is representative samples. And well, think about it. You conduct phone interview, you're gonna interview people who have phones. Well, I know nowadays almost everybody has a phone, but then not everybody would answer the phones, right? So with phone interview, that's the problem. So these are the pros and cons for phone interviews. All right. Another tab is called self-administered questionnaires. Okay, it could be either hard copy, call this paper questionnaires. We could do it electronically, and these questionnaires are distributed over the internet or over the mobile phone, right? So this is a whole picture of what kind of self-administered questionnaire you can do. For paper questionnaire, you can do mail, you can do in-person drop-off. If it's a small location, you can do that. You can do insert, you insert into the newspapers, advertisement, etc. You can do fax, although I'm not quite sure whether that matters these days, right? Fax, I probably will cross it out. With everything going digital nowadays, fax is less useful than before. For electronic format, you can do email, you can put it on the website. This one, well, I almost want to cross it out because we don't do it that much for interviews. We do surveys using mobile phones. But then here's another problem, whether the person has a smartphone or not, right? You do need a smartphone to conduct mobile phone interviews. All right. So mail questionnaire, that's another widely used survey tool to collect data. That is to use mail. And I mean, I believe you do receive mail surveys all the time, right? So let's talk about the pros and cons. What's good about mail questionnaire? What's not good about it? So for mail questionnaire, the first thing is it is geographically flexible, right? And you also have some control of the geographical area you want to send the mail. You can determine, oh, I'm going to send it to all residents in Texas, or I'm going to select certain counties in each state and send out the mail. So it depends on the purpose. And in comparison, if you conduct a phone interview, you may not have that much graphical flexibility, because you might say, oh, I will know the area code, but hey, nowadays, like for me, I live in Texas, but my area code is from Tennessee, because I used to study there and I never changed my phone number. So basically, if I receive a phone call, right, they will take me as a resident in Tennessee instead of Texas. So that's the potential problem in comparison to mail questionnaire. The cost is low. You just need to prepare the survey, send it in the mail, and it's less costly than in-person interview. There's also respondent convenience. That means the respondent can determine whenever they want to reply it. Other than phone interview, you have to take up the phone call. It has to be at that time, or it has to be at a certain time at a certain appointment, and you need to finish the phone interview all at once. For mail questionnaire, you can answer a few questions today, and if you're busy, come back to it a few days later. Okay, so the next pro about mail questionnaire is it is anonymous, right? So you send out the mail, although you know you are sending the mail to these residents, but if you don't put any mark on the mail, you wouldn't know who answered the survey, but you still collect the data. Sometimes they do put numbers on the mail just to eventually know who answered the survey, who sent back the survey. And they do put a mark or a serial number on the mail, on mail survey, so that if some of the people didn't respond, they can send another round of survey. Okay. Another pro would be the absence of interviewer influence, right? Since there's no interviewer at all, there's no interviewer influence. Now about the cons. What's not so good about mail questionnaire? First of all, time is money, right? For mail questionnaire, it takes longer for you to get the result. You send the mail out, and usually it's by first class. That will be several business days, first of all. And the respondent may take their time. They may respond very slowly, and sometimes you have to send another mail to remind them. And therefore, using mail questionnaire in comparison to phone interview and in-person interview is slow, okay? You also have restriction in terms of the length of questionnaire, because you can't make it very long, otherwise people will get bored, get tired, and they will not answer the survey at all, right? It is more prone to self-selection, because here you send out the mail, it's really totally up to the respondents as to whether to answer this or not. Instead, if it's phone interview or in-person interview, you know, as I mentioned, people tend to be a nice person and answer the request, especially for in-person interview. And just because of that, for mail interview, we face very low response rate. Actually, for mail interview, most of the time, you would get about 20 to 30 response rate. That's the normal rate. Think about it. You send out 100 surveys, and eventually you probably only collect 20 to 30 observations. So these are the cons for mail questionnaire. Not just because mail questionnaire is popular but face low response rates, let's talk about a few ways to increase the response rate. Think about the surveys you've received by mail. Okay, usually they include a cover letter. You might say, hey, who read the cover letter? I don't. I mean, yes, you may not read the cover letter. However, a cover letter there will show you that this is a formal survey. Instead, think about it. If you receive a mail survey, there's nothing else in it. There's just a list of questions for you to answer. What would you do? You were like, who is doing this? You probably will throw it away. So usually a cover letter explaining what's going on will make people feel more comfortable answering the questions. And at least I need to know why you are conducting a survey, why I should review my information to you, right? So it has to be something important. Second, money helps. Yes, money is probably the first solution to increase response rate, although it again depends on the budget. If the researcher does not have much budget, then money helps, but there's no, I mean, the researcher, if you cannot afford it, then that wouldn't help. Okay. Interesting questions. Yes, people do love something interesting, right? Don't ask the same type of question all the time, and you will get respondents bored after reading the same tone, the same format of question again and again, right? Follow-ups, sometimes people see the mail questionnaire, they were busy during these days, they put it away. A few days later, they can't find it anymore. If you send a follow-up, okay, with a new questionnaire, they may say, hey, this time I'm gonna answer your survey. Advanced notification can also help because we've received mails, so many mails in a day or in a week, right? Sometimes we just flip through them to see if they're important to us or not. And if you give an advanced notice, the respondents may pay attention to the mails coming up, especially, right, if you mention that you're gonna receive a survey, and after answering the survey, there's money incentive, then that means more incentives for the respondent to keep an eye on the mails to make sure they got the survey, answered the survey. Okay. Lastly, email, internet surveys, electronic surveys. Okay, they become more and more popular these days. However, maybe I'm holding a traditional view. To me, if you're conducting serious research, when I say serious, that means this is critical for making decisions, email and internet surveys are not the best way to go. Let's take a look at advantage first. They are fast and less costly, of course, right? Even less costly than mail questionnaire because you don't need to spend money on the post with the stamps, right? The second advantage will be it's more flexible, right? You got the email address, you select who you want to survey, you send it out. Less handling of paper questionnaire. If you conduct mail surveys, you have to print out paper, send it out, etc. At least for someone like me doing environmental research, I care about how much paper people use. So that's the advantage. Everything is recorded electronically, right? But for email internet surveys, there are, to me, a lot of disadvantages, and some of them are serious disadvantages. For example, there's the first one I would say is hard to identify the actual respondent, right? First of all, you cannot, unless you have a very accurate list, Otherwise, you cannot really verify, oh, this email belongs to that person, right? And also, each person has a lot of email addresses, email boxes, right? So it's hard to identify who is really answering the question. It could be email received by me, but then I don't have time. So say, for example, I tell my husband to answer the survey. So although this survey is sent to me, I'm not the actual person who is answering the survey. Okay, so hard to identify the actual respondent. Representative samples, another issue, right? Not everybody is using emails, not everybody is checking emails, right? Nowadays, especially with younger generation, we tend to use email all the time, and we somehow kind of expect other people to do the same thing. However, that's not true for especially senior citizens, right? Learning how to use computer is already challenging, and in addition, you need to remember all your password and the web page log on to your mailbox to check mailbox. That's a lot of work actually. So if you conduct email, or internet service, you may limit your sample to younger generation, and depends on what you want to find out. If this issue is more related to senior citizens, then email, internet survey are definitely not the one to go with. Okay. Security concerns, that's a big concern, right? You send an email asking about to the respondent to answer a survey, and put a link there. Nowadays, right? We all know you shouldn't click any link sent through email, right? You need to be careful with that. So security concern will, cause the respondents to be very cautious about answering surveys through emails. Response rate actually is not that high for email internet service, and the reason being, again, not everybody is checking emails all the time, and somehow email surveys are not regarded as formal as mail questionnaire, so you still don't have very high response rate in comparison to in-person interview. And finally, I want to mention that reliability is also an issue with email internet surveys. Again, because you don't know who is answering the survey, and since the respondents, you have no way of verifying the respondent, so the respondents have, I guess, more room or more incentive to give false answers or inaccurate answers. So the reliability of the data collected through email internet service is a question. Lastly, I want to add about internet surveys. You could conduct internet surveys, but it depends on how you conduct it. If it's open to everybody, then one person can answer the survey many, many times, and you will never be able to figure that out. So that will also make the data collected inaccurate, right? Now, my personal opinion, unless you are really out of choice, try not to use email internet surveys as long as you can. They have advantages, but they have, to me, the disadvantages weigh out the advantages. So how can you select the proper survey approach? And especially for your research prospectors, you're gonna, after determining your research questions and research hypotheses, you're gonna determine how you collect the data. You could say, I use secondary data, but then you need to make sure you verify the source of such secondary data. And most likely you probably will say, well, I'm gonna collect the data myself using surveys, which is fine. Then you need to mention how you conduct the survey. Okay, who are your target audience, or who are your target population? How are you gonna conduct survey? What format do you use? Well, to pick the right survey, you need to ask the following questions. Is the assistance of an interviewer necessary? Do you really need someone to conduct the survey in person? And also that depends on the budget, right? can you afford to hire a person to conduct the interview in person, right? Now, another question is, are the respondents interested in the issue investigated? And this is related to the response rate. If you don't think the respondents can be very interested in the issues, then you might consider using in-person interview if you can afford, because that will give you a higher response rate. Will cooperation be easily attained, right? How quickly is the information needed? If you need the quick information faster, phone interview is the choice. If you have more time, mail interview is better because it's less costly than phone interview. And will the study require a long and complex questionnaire, right? Phone interview has its limitation because you cannot talk long over the phone call. And so if you require a long and complex questionnaire, you might consider mail interview or in-person interview, because then you can show some visual aids to the respondents. And finally, a key question would be, how large is the budget? If you have a larger budget, choose in-person, because relatively that's the among these we discussed, relatively is the best. If the budgets are not big, then you may consider mail interview. If you really have a very small budget, then you go with email interview, although that is not, I do not recommend that. Okay. And let's comment about your research prospectus. Notice that there's no absolute right or wrong way to conduct the interview, as long as the interview pick is reasonable. Okay, the format of the interview picked is reasonable, you should be fine with that part. So lastly, I'm gonna skip this PowerPoint slide. Basically, it just tells you that sometimes you want to pre-test survey instruments, especially if you're not sure whether the instrument is the right way to go or whether your instrument is effective enough. You may want to test it with a small group of people to see whether it works or not. Okay, and that's all we have for chapter 10. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.